Okay, great. Um, okay, can everyone see my screen slides? Okay, excellent. All right, thanks everyone for coming and hopping on to our open learning series. Today we have our startup and policy panel with some excellent founders and are excited to kind of share their learnings and pick their brain a little bit. As a reminder, we're the Stanford Healthcare Design Challenge. We're focusing a lot on the gap between innovation and implementation. Um, Throughout the month of September, we have great events and speakers and panels, and our applications are due at the end of September on September 30th. October is going to be focused more on the competition itself, matching our participants with mentors, and then our final pitch day is on October 18th. As a reminder, our prompt is to design a financially sustainable and scalable solution tailored for vulnerable populations that effectively addresses their social determinants of health, needs to enhance engagement with healthcare and improve outcomes. You can get more information about our prompt on our website. We have a lot of thought questions written out for you guys, so feel free to interact with that. I'll hand it over to Langsha.
And just to double click on the application process, right? The entire key emphasis is just focus on the team, about who you are, what your motivation is, and how well you understand or dug deep during this month to understand the challenges in SUAH. And in very, very little components actually on the idea itself, because our entire goal in the 2 weeks that you're selected is to really help cultivate the ideas and help drive you in the right direction through our mentorship series and through certain panelists. And then next slide. And yeah, just to share judges here, we have 9 judges who represent C-suites of health systems, government, health payers, and also the FDA. So a pretty well-rounded judging table, and then also a special judge from InterSystems who will be awarding special prizes for best use on data interoperability. And yeah, it's my pleasure to introduce our 3 guest speakers for today. So the first one is Kobe Tanaka. He is the CEO, co-founder of PearSuite. They will each introduce themselves in the first question I ask later. But really quick blurb about PearSuite is that they're empowering community health workers, or CHWs, to address the social drivers of health through their care navigation platform. And our next panelist is Jack Schaefer. He is the CEO, co-founder of MetaCircle, with that's really nice background there. And MetaCircle reclaims unused cancer medications and matches them to financially burdened patients. In doing so, they're providing patients with their medications for free while saving health payers 70% on drug costs. And our third speaker is Nikita. Please correct me if I mispronounce this, but Singareddy?
That's right.
Awesome. She's the CEO and co-founder at Fortuna Health. Fortuna Health is quote unquote TurboTax for Medicaid. We help healthcare organizations as the easiest way for their consumers to navigate Medicaid from eligibility enrollment to renewing coverage. So Kobe, Jack, and Nikita, thank you so much for being here today. Would love to just kind of get started with a quick question about, tell us more about each of you, your background, what inspired you to create the company that you are running now, and quick blurb elevator pitch about your company. And maybe Jack, we'll start with you.
Yeah, happy to start. Hi, everybody. I'm Jack Schaefer, like Long just said, CEO of MetaCircle, originally from New Jersey, now live in Houston, Texas. A little bit about my background before hopping into MetaCircle. I actually consulted for a group called Save One Life. Save One Life is a nonprofit that has redistributed over $165 million worth of hemophilia factor to patients who couldn't otherwise access or afford it. It's also an early hire at a company called IntisCare, where I was their first on their business development team, helped them raise their first round, get their first sale. They've now raised, I think it's over $20 million to lower health costs at long-term care facilities, PACE organizations, and specialized health plans. To give the elevator pitch for MetaCircle, MetaCircle reclaims unused, high-value prescription drugs, recertifies their quality using our patented process, and then matches the medications to patients who couldn't otherwise access or afford it. In doing so, patients receive their medications entirely for free, and health payers save about 70% on their most expensive prescription drugs. To date, we've reclaimed over $5 million worth of medication. And I think that's everything. And I'll hop into more details later. So I guess I'll popcorn it over to Colby.
Everyone, Kobe Takeda here, originally from Hawaii, where I did a lot of work with older adults, as well as the Medicaid population through my work with the Blue Zones Project. That was kind of my first foray into the health tech world, working for ShareCare. Got to see, how startups work together, work with payers and providers and try to build a business model. I think it was really interesting. This was also during the pandemic when there was a lot of challenges, certainly in the world. CHWs, community health workers, is who we work with, and they were really highlighted and elevated during this time because they were on the ground in the communities doing amazing work and previously not getting paid for this work. And so our whole mission at PairSuite is to empower and uplift community health workers, help them better partner with healthcare payers and providers, and then help them get paid for their work through billing. And certainly a lot of policy changes have led to that work. And so I'm excited to dive into that today. Pass it over to Nikita.
Thanks, Colby. It's so great to have Jack and Colby on this call because I think we all do very different things in healthcare. And I think that'll be really exciting as you go through the different questions. A little bit about my background and the work we do at Fortuna. So I consider myself to be one of the worst healthcare consumers and I guess workers in healthcare. And what I mean by that is I'm a hugely avoidant person. Like I don't in the sense of healthcare. I hate going to the doctor. I hate when the doctor texts me or my insurance company contacts me. And so I really take that point of view and how we build and design a lot at our company. Then separate to that, like many folks, when I first got into healthcare, I had no idea what any terms meant. I remember during my interview, my first job was at Oscar Health, begging and praying that they wouldn't ask me what is a copay and what is a deductible because I still had no idea what that meant, even though I was in my final interview. So I think that is really common to how everyone, right, in America or even elsewhere experiences and thinks about healthcare. And I think it's really important as you're designing for healthcare to take what is the standard average person's perspective and try to infuse that in what you're building. So that's been incredibly important, particularly for the work that we do in Medicaid. So we use that TurboTax for Medicaid analogy because we think that's exactly what we're building. A very simple experience to understand, do you qualify for Medicaid or government coverage? Going through a simple, guided, personalized experience, much like TurboTax does for your taxes, but for enrolling into government coverage and then helping you renew as well.
That's awesome. No, thank you all for sharing your journeys. I'm curious about learning more about maybe your 0 to 1 journey as an entrepreneur and something you wish you had known earlier in your healthcare implementation journey. We can start with Colby.
Sure. So yeah, I think it's interesting. There's a lot of ideas out there and a lot of problems to solve in healthcare. Which is great that everyone here and everyone that's in this challenge is going to be tackling some of these challenges. I think at the end of the day, people forget that you have to make money with businesses and you have to find ways to align your interests with the interests of people that have cash to spend on your product or service or whatever the idea is. We were really lucky during the pandemic. There was quite a lot of funding rumbling around out there. And so we were able to capitalize on opportunities to get funding to support our work early on and really help us build and discover and test. Certainly it was a pandemic, so there was a lot of things to do and a lot of needs to address. And so we had lots of opportunities to apply our ideas and test it out with different organizations. We're also really fortunate to get a lot of early customers in a market that I knew really well, Hawaii. And so, it's all about how do you use relationships, your interest, your knowledge around certain topics to really capitalize on testing things out. I think startup founders sometimes think they want to, sell to Cedars-Sinai or Stanford Hospital immediately off the bat and get the biggest payers and providers out there. But, what about smaller opportunities? And so we really capitalize on nonprofits and community groups that maybe were willing to test things out and didn't have a long procurement process. We're able to get, smaller check sizes for our deals, but it allowed us to really test and not have to worry about going through legal and diligence and having, SOC 2 compliance and getting high trust. I mean, we were able to really test things out quickly. And that led us to the next biggest deal, right? So getting early data and results from small customers, then get us bigger customers and medium customers, and then get bigger customers after that. So I think people should realize that these opportunities to test is sometimes more valuable than actually getting lots of revenue off the bat. And so that's kind of our 0 to 2030 that we experienced. Yeah.
I'll follow up and just say double tick, triple tick to everything Colby says. The best thing about that period of time before you have a ton of customers is just that you get to make a lot of mistakes, and that's okay. In fact, you want to make all of those mistakes before you're a large company and you realize, oh wait, we don't even have product market fit, right? So I think that everything Colby said is spot on. I think the other really important thing about testing is you need to create an environment to really see your product in the wild. Because a lot of the classic, here's how you do a user interview. Yeah, that's important, that's good, but that's a lot of framing that tees up the answer that they think you want them to give you. What you actually need to do is just sit and watch and see what happens. And then maybe I'm even getting ahead of my skis because a lot of the time you shouldn't even build a product yet. A lot of the work is just understanding what is the true problem that you're solving for and putting the most basic non-solution in their hands to understand what could your real true solution be. For example, for us, we in the first 6 months, honestly, of the company didn't actually build a product. We were doing the work of helping people apply, enroll, et cetera, into Medicaid, but we didn't have a web application at that point. That taught us a lot about what are people nervous about, what is not working about the existing processes to help frame for us what we think the actual web application should look like eventually. It taught us a ton of things. Just to give an example of that, in the way most states, whether it's California with Medi-Cal or let's say Minnesota with MNsure, a lot of those don't have any form of screening. It basically throws you into the application and it says, do your entire enrollment for you and your family. And then at the end, we'll maybe give you a determination for whether you get Medicaid or not, which drives a lot of people to just drop off on the first page because people want to know pretty quickly, might I be eligible? That's the thing that's going to encourage me to actually go through and apply. And so when we realized that screening experience was missing, then we reoriented around our web application should actually focus more on this experience that doesn't even exist today. So watching what's currently wrong with the existing thing before you even build anything at all is maybe the add-on that I would say to Colby's great answer.
To follow up, they took everything that I'd say verbatim. It's exactly that, which is everyone sweeps or aims for the biggest targets, but starting really small so that you have the opportunity to iterate is so important. And like Nikita said, we call it a Wizard of Oz test, which is just jumping right in. And I'll tell the story of MetaCircle, which is when we finally got our licensure to begin redistributing medication, we hadn't built the product yet to be able to reclaim from across the state, but phone calls started pouring in from patients who wanted to send medications and they had unused medication. So rather than turning them away, we said, we'll send our pickup team. And so me and my co-founder hopped in the car and drove all around Texas, picking up the medications to make sure that they were being properly delivered. And in that experience, we were speaking with patients, learning about their story and speaking with them. And that allowed us to develop a much better product. So everything that Colby and Nikita said, I'll second.
Yeah, really want to quadruple click onto everything that Kobe, Nikita, and Jack just said, right? The entire component is how do you, on the ground level, understand your customers? And oftentimes the best way is by living that life, like, in the case of Nikita, right, helping them actually enroll before an automated solution. In the case of Jack, literally going to pick up the medications. And that will really help you understand your customer segment to an intimate level that allows you to then really drive value in the most seamless and workflow integrated way.
Can I add a note?
Yes, go for
For
it.
the application, I think I heard from potential applicants that are thinking about, oh, maybe I have to send a pitch deck or something like that. And I think that lends itself to focusing on a large market. But the contrary to that, I think what we would like to see is that understanding of the problem and a clear target segment that you can spend more time understanding and will facilitate kind of the building out of the rest of this during the October part of the challenge.
Yeah, and we had created this panel because each of the companies that these three represent, had they been earlier in their journeys by the time this competition came around, would all be very likely winners because they are doing such high impact work, and yet it's so intricately integrated into S2H needs, right? And as Nikita was mentioning, each of those are three very, very different approaches to a major problem at hand. And I wanted to kind of double click into kind of working and understanding your customers. And specifically, Kobe, you were mentioning the harder ones that have very long bill cycles, just very complicated to work with, right? But each of y'all have now worked with them in some degree. Jack, you've done it with policymakers, you've done it with payers. Nikita, you're working likely with the CMS and just understanding Medicaid services, as well as the patient populations there. And then Kobe, you're doing a lot of work on a national level now for advocacy with community health workers. What was that process like? How is it working with policy and government and reimbursements? And any advice you have for folks who want to get into that field?
I can take that in a way. So I would say a lot of it comes down to just thoughtful sequencing, because really you're not going to try to get to, let's say, for somebody's company, the federal government, right, go directly to CMS, or even maybe the state. You're probably not reaching for that right when you start off. But you need to know what are the things that you're doing today that earn you the right to those conversations, because you've established very clearly, you understand this problem, you've aligned yourselves with the people in need, as well as the folks that are influencers in this particular topic. And then that gives you a lot of credibility with your partner when you're, or let's say with the state, at least in our context, when you're able to speak with them. So examples of that, at least for us, we have a number of hospital partners in different states. And that for us was a lot about bringing that leverage to have conversations with the state about challenges we see in their existing processes. However, the state is not going to take you seriously, right? If you don't really have any customers at that point, you're just trying to say, hey, we think these are the 20 things wrong with your existing system, processes, et cetera. However, if you come in with, we've served now 20 to 30,000 constituents in your state. We serve XYZ hospitals from rural through to, let's say, a large, even state-based health system or hospital. That is very different. And so I think for us, we didn't necessarily know it was going to tee up well, but in hindsight, I realized like now we're able to have such great conversations with the state, and also knowing at the state who you're supposed to be talking to, at least in our specific circumstance. So you have for many states a Health and Human Services, which is not necessarily the same as the Department of Workforce, who's not the same as IT. However, especially in healthcare, there's a lot of overlapping parts of the state that still coordinate with each other. So you need to know that as well by the time you have a conversation with them.
To piggyback off of what Nikita said, you also want to team up with people that are on your team. And so, for example, when it comes to pharmaceutical redistribution, NABP, which is the National Association of Boards of Pharmacy, American Medical Association, AMA, ASCO, ACS, all have example letters and policies that they put out and say, this is what we recommend states do. And so by teaming up with other groups like that to be able to share your message and amplify your message has proven really effective for MetaCircle. And so looking at who else is on your side, who believes the same things, and who has similar authority.
Yeah, I'll just add that, I come from the public health background, and policy, advocates and wonks, they do a great job advocating for things and passing bills, but it doesn't make you money, right? It doesn't help you grow a business. What does help you grow a business is understanding the policy and seeing how that aligns with your work in innovation, in your services, in your product. I think we excelled very well because we understood the policy, we understood what's coming down the pipeline, we understood how to interpret and operationalize the policy, and we could align the policy with the interests that we're trying to, or groups that we're trying to sell to. So how does the policies come into the pipeline around health equity, around social and health, impact potential payers and providers in the healthcare system, right? How are their interests going to change, and are they going to be financially impacted by these policies? And how do we make sure we help solve those problems they're facing? So I think really understanding the policy, being in tune to future policymakers' interests, being able to align your work with those policies so you can really bring value to your potential customers is really key. And then certainly, we do a lot of policy work now, and what it does, it actually makes us a policy expert. People come to us to ask us questions about the policy, and they turn to us, and at the same time, we're also helping to sell our product and align our work with the specific needs that they also have.
Yeah, I mean, this is super important. And I also want to kind of just follow up, Jack, with you, because I know your story a bit more in background. You actually helped write and draft policies for both Rhode Island and Texas to get the, MetaCircle off the ground. Could you share with the audience a bit about that process?
Yeah, of course. So I'll start, the story started when I was an undergraduate student at Brown University. And like I mentioned, we started by trying to become experts in pharmaceutical redistribution. And so we learned every policy I could memorize and recite all 43, at that time it was 41 legislations, spoke with every single policymaker I could. And we spoke with over 1,000 people by the end. And so through that expertise, worked with Brown University and was ultimately invited by the Committee on Health and Human Services to put forward laws and regulations, and that got the ball rolling. And that proven success in Rhode Island ultimately helped us move to Texas, where we were also invited by the Committee on Health and Human Services and the Committee on Public Health to be able to put forward legislation that ultimately Chair Click, which is a chairwoman, a lawmaker in Texas, ultimately pushed and helped pass that legislation in the state of Texas. And with that expertise and background, it ultimately helped us become, like Colby mentioned, groups now come to MetaCircle asking for laws, regulations, and also on a regulatory level, Department of State Health Services, boards of pharmacy, looking for how to properly implement redistribution laws in their states as the laws continue to change. I'm happy to talk more about kind of what it tangibly looked like, but that's the story.
Was that the silence for me to ask a question? Okay, then I'll transition to the next one. So I was curious, just knowing some of the different startup stories here, how do you all think about engaging potential users from different backgrounds, especially those with language access challenges or limited English proficiency?
Yeah, I'm sure Nikki will have good examples here. So we, we can't build for everyone on day one, right? We knew that we had to build and focus in on target. So as much as we knew we had to expand the capacity and accessibility of our software, and we couldn't have that as part of our product roadmap on month one, year one. We have since been able to incorporate that given the interest of our customers. And so I think, when everything you do, it's all about who are you building for and what are their needs and interests. If they're asking for things in different languages and different, formats to make it more accessible for them, then great, you can build it. But until they ask for it, maybe it's not best to invest in engineering dollars and time to build it. So it's actually great. It's funny, as much as I do work in this space and I know, how to do the community health worker work. Our CTO always says, find me a customer that wants that and we'll build it. And so it's always great to be mindful of investing in that. But we do offer our software that's translatable in 130 languages now through Google Translate. We also have the ability to build out workflows and text templates and communication materials in different languages, which is really great. We also have are exploring some accessibility features that allows it to be helpful for those who are visually impaired and people that are more cued by sound and audio versus typing the text. So having some voice recognition and transcription as well. But yeah, that's a really good key. And certainly a lot of the work that community health workers do is with those who are non-English native speakers. And so yeah, certainly a big key area to focus on with working with social mental health and the inequities of our health system.
Yeah, I agree with Colby. You can't build everything. And so you have to decide what are going to be, I would say, easy things to do that have high impact in terms of how you sequence. So it could be language, it could be, let's say, color, it could be a whole host of things. You actually have to decide what that is. And your audience really matters. So we're a consumer-facing product. We don't, our user, for example, is not somebody who is let's say, community health worker. They might use it, but for us, that's not actually our consumer. So that is a really important framing. So you may need to think about accessibility differently given that. So for us, oh my gosh, we spend so much time on this, it's not even funny. For us getting up and running with some of our health plan partners, we had to, out of the gate, have a certain number of languages. It was a non-starter to only be available in English. So we had to focus a lot on it from day one. And we had to come up with infrastructure that was more than just, can you have internationalization, which is, some form of translation. We have, for all the languages, we have an actual individual that's separate to our more automated translations, actually goes through and with cultural competency takes a look at, and tries to translate. So an example of this is actually in Mandarin. The phrase, if you just translated Medicaid, for example, or medical assistance into Mandarin, it doesn't actually make much sense. It doesn't compute like what this program is. So we actually use the terminology white card because in Mandarin that translates to a form of government coverage. So it's like that extra level of cultural competency that we, at least in our business, really have to take seriously, because it's the difference between, you know, increasing conversion and increasing ROI for our partners. Like 2% is equal to 28 million in revenue, you know, for the end at an end stage for one of our managed care partners or our managed care partners. So understanding who is your actual user, and then based who on your user is, then prioritizing some of the accessibility has been like really important for us.
Following up on that, at MetaCircle, we have a saying, and it's not our saying, it's a saying in the startup community, which is don't build to scale. And so to date, when we focus on making sure that we're providing access to all patients across language barriers and other barriers to entry, we focus on making sure that we're meeting the patient right there. And so it almost all starts with a phone call. And we immediately, when a patient reports that they have if there's a language, for example, that it's not in English, we have a separate group that we work with that hops onto every phone call as a translation service. And that way, it's not the most effective, it's not the most cost effective, but to date, it's been proven to make a huge difference in our patients' reporting of their satisfaction, because they're meeting the patient right where it is. And so while that will likely not be the best solution as we scale and grow quickly, to date, it's been a fantastic opportunity.
Cool. Hi, my name is Akash. I'm part of the SHDC team. Thank you, Nikita, Colby, Jack, for being here and spending the time with us. I had a question, and okay, I got to think about how to like phrase this, but for SHDC and this competition specifically, like, you know, we're just focusing on like what is a good solution that really addresses SDOH in a meaningful way to improve health outcomes. Now, when I look at you all, you guys have obviously taken this like way further. And to get there, it really seems that it's important to find a like financially sustainable model, meaning like a business model that actually like works in the kind of solution space you're thinking about. Because that's, to me, it seems like that's kind of a prerequisite to like scaling and being, you know, sustainable over many years. And like case in point, like Nikita, I love your point on like calling it, you know, white card instead of Medicaid. And that translates to a real dollar value for one of your customers. Kind of like in that vein, I'm curious how you all have kind of developed eventually like a business model that can leverage, you know, incentives, but still does what you want. I guess like in my experience, I've sometimes found like working on SDOH is oftentimes at odds with like existing financial incentives. For example, like some things you just can't get reimbursed for, or like some things just aren't like, I guess, canonically like financially valued well. For example, like community health workers, whereas like their impact is probably much larger than the amount they get paid. So I'm curious how you guys like eventually came across business models, whether, you know, the incentive was just there and no one was using it, or you guys like made policy changes to make this business model happen. I'm curious like how you guys, and maybe even if you could like talk a little bit about your business model and how that fits in with your mission, I think that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, I think everyone on this call has a perspective on this. And just to speak from a philosophy perspective, I think that there's a lot of work that you can do through the means of a charity or a nonprofit, but at least Fortuna, we've made the business to be a for-profit venture-backed business. So with that, it means there are trade-offs that you're making, and you have to be okay with that if that's the decision you've made in terms of your company setup. I think Colby said this earlier, there are a lot of hard problems to solve in healthcare. And I'm going to be super transparent on it. There's a lot of hard problems that it's like, it's kind of a reason it's a hard problem, and technology may not be the thing that fixes it, and that's okay. But coming to terms with that, and then making a decision whether you want to build something in the space is like is a separate story. That does mean though, given we are all building companies that touch social determinants of health, the bar is a lot higher, unfortunately, for the businesses that we're building. And it means we have to be triply good at demonstrating ROI and having very clear ways to show what the ROI is. So it meant, even as a small seed stage company on our side, we had with all of our customers ROI models that we used in our sales processes. Very clear way of saying XYZ thing that users do in our product yields XYZ for you as a plan. The ROI looks like this, And the ROI for revenue is different than the ROI on margin. And so you need to, the amount that you need to understand their business as well as your business and the dynamics at play, whether it's policy, as Colby mentioned earlier, or Jack, even in some on the margin side of pharmacy, you need to know this like the back of your, excuse my French, fucking hand. Like that's just where the bar is for companies that are building in health equity and social determinants of health. You don't have the same luxury that a lot of commercial companies that are just playing in the commercial space have. The reality, at least for our businesses, we're playing the Medicaid space. So there's a lot of preconceived notions of what that means, who the user is, how much quote money there is in the space, et cetera. And I find that very exciting. I think that's the challenge that calls you to be and build better. But it's really important that you understand, if you're building for social determinants of health or in health equity, that that's where the bar is.
Yeah, I can share. So we are currently a company that does SaaS. So we have a product that we sell on a subscription basis, on a monthly recurring basis per user per month. So anyone who uses our software, the community health workers, the doulas, anyone who's in the community who's logging into our platform has a subscription. We didn't get here day one. We actually started off as a services company doing a lot of the work ourselves. And people are paying us lots of money to do the work. I realized, of course, that doesn't scale. It's hard to build an army of siege studies, and we can only get so far with a team. So we ended up started shifting over to really focusing on our SaaS product. We still do some services here and there, and health plans want it, so we do it. And it helps us get into new markets. It helps us grow our team and expertise. It helps us build our product better. But we're mostly focused on our SaaS business model. Certainly, yeah, there's a lot of problems in healthcare. I mean, you think about some health plans and providers still use postcards to get people engaged. They send out reminders with paper, handwritten notes, right? Certainly, there's a lot of new innovations coming down the pipeline, and people are exploring this. And but at the end of the day, it has to, again, your product or solution has to result in some kind of financial gain for the organization, or better outcomes, or something that really solves a pain for them. They always say that it's better, pain points and challenges are things that they will actually pay money for, not things that will improve XYZ measures. So what are some pains and problems that you're solving? Because that is probably worth paying for more than just improving X, Y, or Z. I'll also say that business models can adapt, but there's also different business models for different customers. So if you're selling to multiple customers, how is your creative solution addressing that specific need, and how do you align your pricing, your business model, your method of reimbursement or pay based on that customer's familiarity? You can't go to a nonprofit and say, I want to charge you a PMPM is per member per month, because they don't know what PMPM is, right? But that's how health plans like to pay. So thinking about what's the appropriate business model for the customer you're serving. And then certainly when you tie in SDOH, there's so many different creative ways that health plans are interested and health providers are interested in addressing SDOH. And so, you don't have to try to solve for all the SDOH at once. You can also be subject matter experts in one or two SDOH, right? What are some clean solutions that will then help you increase engagement to get to your doctor, to fix your annual wellness visit and solve for all other challenges? And it's that one SDOH around food and that solution around food that really helps create that engagement and that excitement, and they open the doors for lots of other preventative measures to be addressed. And that's a way to solve problems that I think health plans and providers are really interested in, and clinics as well.
Regarding MetaCircle, I know when we started, revenue was a huge question on how we would be able to address it, how we would be able to get it. And we started off as a nonprofit. And then we quickly learned from multiple phone calls and interest from groups who were trying to lower their prescription drug costs that MetaCircle had a viable business. And so similar to Nikita, what you talked about, which is when trying to do social determinants of health and when trying to even just move the needle in the healthcare system, deciding what the best strategy is. Is it a nonprofit? Is it a benefit corporation? Is it a consulting service, or is it a venture-backed business? We looked at all of those options and wanted to decide what was the best choice to be able to make move the needle and help the most people. We ultimately decided, similar to what you talked about, Nikita, is a venture-backed business. And in doing so, one of the big questions is, how do you make money? And so we ended up looking at multiple different options because we had a lot of groups really interested. And the best thing, and it's the same advice I always give to everybody, go talk to people. Just be open and honest and say, we're trying to figure this out. And we spoke with, I think on revenue specifically, maybe 450 people over 7 months, just trying to learn how the heck this industry worked. What was it all about? And we ultimately got very specific, and you can hear it now in the way I actually present MetaCircle. We used to just say we provide patients with free medications, and the new caveat is we now add, we provide patients with the medications for free and save payers 70% on the most expensive prescription drugs. What we learned is there's two very key groups that are desperate to lower their prescription drug spending, more desperate than any other group in the industry. Value-based care providers who assume risk on Part D drugs, and self-insured employers at a certain stage and size, especially with lower margin self-insured employers. Those are our two key demographics that are literally desperate to lower drug costs. And so the second you start targeting the right people, it just comes naturally on. This is how we've worked with other groups, and it all starts to come together. But the key focus is on learning the very specifics of the industry, and you'll only get that by talking to people. So the best advice I'd give is reach out to your network. Every time you speak with somebody, say, is there 3 other people you'd introduce me to that would be interested in what we're working on?
Yeah, thank you all so much for sharing this. And I just want to kind of address the audience here for both the people attending today, as well as the ones that will watch this later. Building in healthcare is hard, right? And we've heard this from all 3 panelists. And it starts with the perspective of their own backgrounds and then the customer needs finding. And eventually it spins into that 0 to 1 journey. If you're both building the company and building your own character and your own persona as a CEO or as an entrepreneur. And this also dives deep into understanding how to truly reach your customers and the vulnerable populations and achieve your social impact mission, right? And this includes working with and understanding the complicated stakeholders involved, whether that's the payers, the policymakers from governments, the nonprofits. They all need to be involved in some way, and you need to understand their models, their incentives, and how you can make that return. And this eventually spirals into that business model and ROI that we just asked about. But even though building in healthcare is hard, it's so rewarding because you get to see the impact you make on the communities where it matters the most, right? We have around 21 minutes left, and I really want to just open the floor because I could ask these people questions, this entire day. But what questions do you have for them? And, we want to just open the floor to allow you to ask them. We'll embrace the awkward silence until someone asks a question.
Hey, hi, this is Abhay. I'm from India and I do own a startup, and I would like to know more about navigating the regulatory challenges in other nations like India, Southeast Asian nations, and particularly when the products and other things are manufactured in US.
At least
I
for
hope I'm audible and my question is clear.
No, I think we can hear your question. At least my company is very specific to the US. There is sure forms of Medicaid in other countries. But I can give a broad answer for regulatory and how we keep track of that. And I'm sure everybody here is doing that in some way. I think it actually, to Colby, something Colby, I think, said earlier, it becomes such a competitive advantage to really understand your policy space. And then I guess Jack is already influencing policy, where I would like to be doing that at some point in the future. So I'll need to ask you for tips. But so much of healthcare and the businesses built in healthcare are an unlock from some major policy shift or change, or even an agency decision. Whether it's things like the transparency rules that created companies that have been very successful, like a Turquoise Health, or obviously Epic is the consequence of policy decisions and changes as well that created the reason we have EMRs today very consistently across the market. A lot of the value-based care companies in the nephrology and kidney care space are also a direct consequence of policy changes that were made by CMS. And you can really just go down the list, even in consumer, because I love this example. The reason that Hubble contacts and a lot of these contact companies came about is because of a patent that expired. And that patent expiring created all these direct to consumer contact companies. So if you're really good at looking at policy changes or policy policy amendments and things like that, that you can really use that to find really interesting opportunities for your business. For Fortuna, at least, Medicaid unwinding and redetermination was a really big tailwind for us. So even though it wasn't really a policy change, it was things that had not really happened in policy up until that point at both the state and the federal level reached a squeezing point that really affected our customers. And so that created big opportunities for us. So regulatory, the more you understand it, the more you use it to your advantage, I think can be really huge in healthcare.
Thanks for answering that question. In fact, specifically, I do like to understand navigating this medtech devices, because each country has its own standardization that it's following when it comes to medical devices, right? So manufacturing customized medical devices for different nations is going to be a pretty hectic task when it comes to navigating these challenges from that perspective. Uh, I mean, is there any possible pathway that you would suggest to actually reach out to these governments and follow certain
So
trajectory in this case?
I think I can take that one just because it's a little different from what the panelists are working on. We have recording from this Monday on our website from Sebastian Jairaj, who both has built and led product at startups, at biotech companies, from health systems, and he's now at the FDA, and he offers some resources from the US perspective. But you could take that and think like, okay, who are the people that I could reach out to within my government that would have that answers questions from the public, from innovators, and start there. I can send you that now too.
Cool. Okay, sure.
I can also quickly comment because I've been building in more medical devices fields, but I would say 80 to 90% of most standards are similar across the world, right? And you have some that are more country specific, but US oftentimes is a lot more regulated than other countries, right? So usually a good rule of thumb is like if you follow the US regulations for what FDA would be looking for, you'd be in pretty good shape. And then there's some constancies of standards like throughout. You need risk mitigation, right? You need basically, if you're building medical devices specifically, biocompatibility tests, duration, temperature, humidity. All of those are pretty much consistent. And then, ISO 13485 is always a really great starting point. ISO 27001 is a different one that you should also look into. But generally speaking, it's different language for the same exact concepts. That's what I've been seeing throughout the trends.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for that link.
I have a question. So, when you have a product or you have a solution, what's the best way to determine which populations would benefit most from what you're designing? Like, how do you survey a big population? Is it like by going and asking people or sending out surveys? Or what's the best way to scan the market and see who would most benefit from what you're designing?
I have so many fun examples of how we did this so wrong, which maybe will help you do it more right than us. There are a lot of posts that you can read online, and we went through Y Combinator, so there's a lot of YC mantras about how to do large scale and small scale user research. A lot of them just won't work depending on the type of business that you're building. But when we started, we didn't know that. So we're like, great, let's do everything that YC is recommending because they're the Bible when it comes to startups. We, for example, tried to create a survey that we posted on a bunch of websites. They tell you to go to Facebook, share them elsewhere, put it on Reddit. We got banned from Reddit. I got banned from the AARP. I didn't even know that was a place you could get banned from, but I'm banned from there because I was posting the link for a free survey. We then tried, what if we said we'd pay you $5 on Craigslist for XYZ, answering a subset of questions. That quasi worked. We ended up, somebody ended up sending us weird pictures, just strange things that happened that didn't actually help us understand more about our users. The third one that I really thought would work but didn't, we posted an well, it wasn't really an advertisement. We posted a role on a website where people who want to be actors and actresses can respond to the ad and create a 10-second, 60-second audition. And for us, it was around Medicaid because many actors make below the federal poverty line, and so they're eligible for Medicaid. We thought that would psyop them into checking out Fortuna because they were actually eligible. Turns out that happened with about 0, but we had a lot of people making fake ads for Fortuna. So we tried and experimented with a lot of stuff that just basically did not work, but it was all interesting. The thing that really did work was doing, honestly, the most uncomfortable stuff, which was physically going to a lot of settings. We tabled on on the boardwalk in Coney Island. We were in the subway at Atlantic Avenue in New York on the 4th of July. So we didn't go to parties, we weren't with family, we were doing that because we thought it would be a good day to interact and run into a lot of people. We partnered with Asian American community organizations. We partnered with public housing. We sent probably 500, 600 emails that went unanswered. It's all of the, and we even made phone calls to nonprofits, all kinds of that. All of that stuff, that's the shitty, non-scalable stuff, but actually puts you in the uncomfortable scenarios to get an answer. Those were the best ways for us to learn. Those are a lot of small scale things to do user research, but I think that that was the most impactful and best that influenced where our product went. Separate to that, there are a ton of studies that talk about a lot of the things that you may be working on because health equity is has such a huge spotlight on it in healthcare. So where you can't find some of those answers in these large studies, do the uncomfortable stuff to try to get closer to your users.
Man, I should start speaking earlier because Nikita took exactly all of the stuff that I wanted to say. So there's two things that I absolutely want to second what Nikita said, which is go talk to people. So for MetaCircle, actually, I'll start with the first part, which is you don't ever want to build a solution that's looking for a problem. You always want to find a problem and build a solution. And so what scares me in your question is you asked, I have the solution, who should I give it to? What I'd recommend you go do is go talk to as many people as possible and go do the uncomfortable things that Nikita said. The example that we did at MetaCircle, we started saying who would want this. So we literally we started by picking up the phone and calling the number that was on skilled nursing facilities, nursing homes, hospitals, cancer centers, and just calling people and saying, hey, can we come by and talk to you? Obviously that didn't work. So instead, we all hopped in my dorm mate's car and drove all across New England, knocking on doors with pamphlets saying, we are students at Brown University. We'd like to come speak with you. Can you just answer a few questions? And we would spend as much uncomfortable time in their facilities as possible. Can we watch you do this? And we basically just got to shadow. I spent a day as a janitor at a nursing home, seeing how a janitor spent their day, because then I could see what happened when there were unused medications. And that was actually when the realization came was, hey, where are you taking those meds? We went to this back room and saw this huge waste bin of unused medications. That was because I spent the day with a cleanup crew. And so you never know where you're going to find it, but what you got to do is go out and do the uncomfortable stuff, speaking with people. And so I would start there rather than with the solution.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that, and that's really, really key, is find the problem you're trying to solve first, just like what Jack mentioned. The other thing is when you ask questions, make sure you're iterating on your questions because you don't want to keep asking these very broad questions. Ask 10 people and then figure out, okay, what are the questions I have to ask beyond that, right? And then change your questions, get more specific, find really specific people, right? Really focus in on the specific person you're trying to reach. Try to get narrow and narrow so that you can actually get exactly what you're trying to solve for and how to do it. And so just kind of keep iterating on those questions as well as the asking more people for the same answers to questions.
One thing I also want to add, one of the greatest assets you have as a student is your email. You have a lot of professors and people inside your ecosystem that are more than willing to do a pro bono call if you're just trying to understand more, right? And you can also use that to shadow physicians. So you can go in a clinic and then ask nurses and physicians who are there, questions you have or perspectives you have. You can even use that technically to talk to patients. Not endorsing it or anything, but basically just putting it out there, you have an enormous asset and utilize that community in your email to just learn as much as you can.
And I wanted to layer onto that with things that were brought up previously around becoming an expert in a policy area. You don't have to go and saying, I'm trying to build a startup, I'm trying to build a solution. You just say, hi, I'm a student. I'm very curious about the space you're working in. I'd like to learn more about what you do. Mention a few things that you've learned about this space, to Colby's point, from previous conversations or secondary research review, and start to just quickly do that intro and then listen and, learn from each conversation and each interaction. And then when you're not a student, it's harder.
Yes, leverage the student. To anybody, if you send an email, hey, I'm a student, I just want to learn about this space, there is very few people will turn that down. As long as you're just being open and honest and being saying, I want to learn, I want to try and create something, everybody's happy to speak with you.
Thank you. That was really helpful.
Also, I dropped a few links about bottom-up research in the chat.
Thanks.
It's talking with humans as an AI, right? Okay.
No, I think Talking with Humans is I think it's GIF Constable.
Just
Yes,
kidding.
Talking and Testing with Humans, both are really great books that I'd recommend. You can get them for free on his website too.
Okay, cool. I also have another question. I'm curious to understand, I mean, to learn more about the challenges that you might have faced or you might be facing with investors.
Maybe
Any
more
of your
specific
investors,
question.
any of your,
Is it
I
around a
would like
certain topic, or is it around product or fundraising, or what is the specific ask around
fundraising,
investors?
fundraising and convincing them that your product is actually something useful.
One thing that, and Colby knows this, one of our managing directors, Matt Kozlov, teaches, and I think he says it in a good way. It's your job to de-risk your product, not the investors. And so if there's a constant thing that's coming up, it is your job to go find proof that, or prove it. And so there's something that's more broadly on how you're supposed to build a startup called assumption testing. What you're, or oh shoot, long show, risk triaging. Thank you. Risk triaging, which is you're supposed to lay out all the biggest risks for your company and you prove them out one by one. And so your goal is, and I think Paul Graham, and to quote Nikita's Y Combinator Bible, it's startups are a grand experiment. These are all different ways of saying your job is to de-risk whatever you're trying to build. And so what you want to do is have assumptions on the most minimal viable product way you can and prove those out. So if this is actually needed, well, the best way to solve that is go prove that people need it, either by speaking with them or by building something that isn't actually what you're going to build, but something that actually solves the problem. There's many different ways that in a cheap, not without having funding, that you can prove certain parts of your business out.
Yeah, in fact, the reason I asked this question is the moment we start speaking that our product is related to healthcare, they start looking at something like of a non-profit and this is not going to make any money out of it. So this is the perception that they usually have, right? Yeah, cool. Thank you.
I mean, also just really quickly to double click on what Jack was saying. There's an exercise that I sometimes do for some of the talks, which is, you give people a pattern, 2, 4, 8, right? And the entire goal is the first person that comes up with the right rule for what that pattern is gets a prize. And then you can guess as many different things as you want. So you can guess more test cases, and I'll tell you yes or no on whether that's fits a pattern or not. And you can guess the pattern itself. And usually when I do this, like the first few guesses I get just conform to that pattern of 4, 8, 16, or 16, 32, 64, right? And it's only when you start guessing what you don't think it is, such that you can actually find out the rule, that you can actually begin to understand more about this true pattern. And the long story short, the pattern was just basically any number. It can be an integer, a negative, an irrational, any number that's just bigger than the next one counts as part of that pattern. But what you needed to do is ask enough questions and guess enough and be willing to fail and be told, no, this is not right, to really understand the true pattern. And that is exactly the key component of running a company and doing this hypothesis testing and risk triage, right? Come up with your hypotheses, but come up with ones that you don't think are true in the case that you're seeing, and see if that's actually true.
Maybe my
This very much
final-
sounds like proof by contradiction.
Yes, basically.
Yeah, cool.
I was going to say something probably very, very separate to this, which is if you're thinking about your company in a fundraising context, the short answer of it, a lot of investors are lemmings and quite frankly, just like follow whatever else is going on in the market. That's like the truth. And so at some point, of course, you're going to get rejections, or maybe you're going to be the hottest company that everybody wants to invest in. None of that actually matters. What ultimately is going to matter at the end of the day is, are you a revenue producing company? That is your goal, especially if you're a venture-backed business. That is the most important thing. But to be a revenue generating company, you have to have made you have to have understood what your hypothesis was and built the right product that actually has product market fit. So no matter what, everything just continues to come back to, do you have PMF? Like, and that's the thing that so many companies get wrong, even companies that end up being Series C, Series D, they skipped a lot of the hypothesis testing because they got preoccupied with fundraising and all the nonsense that they took as proxies for whether the company was actually working or not. And so all you can do is just be very transparent and honest with yourself and with your co-founders. Is the product you're building the thing that actually has PMF? And you'll know there's a lot of things that tell you if you actually have PMF, whether it's do users love your product, whether it's revenue, whether it's customers banging down your door. There are 5,000 stories that startups who have true PMF, companies that have gone public, companies that have got acquired, can tell you about this. And I think all of that comes first before fundraising or anything related to investors.
The quote, I think it's Pitbull, is if you ask for money, get advice. If you ask for advice, get money, twice or something. And it's very true when you go talk to VCs. The only point of a VC is I'd start by asking for advice or investors in general, because the business always speaks for itself. And so really when speaking with anybody, you shouldn't be asking for money. You should be asking for how can I build the best business? And if the business is working, the money will come.
Yeah, Jack, Kobe, Nikita, thank you so much. This has been great. And then just to close out our last couple of components, we are holding a team formation mixer and office hours this Sunday from 3 to 4. Zoom information is already sent on Slack and email. We have 2 more amazing speakers coming up to wrap up our September series. The first one is a partner of health and biotech at 816Z. And our next one is the former CEO of Kaiser Permanente, as well as the New York's former public health commissioner. So they will be wrapping up basically the investment realm and the health system perspectives. And then just quick thanks to all our partners and supporters. We wouldn't be able to do this without y'all. But yeah, we can end recording here, but thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.